black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smoking Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the show, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. And especially in this time, in this day and age, in this political environment that we're in the 21st century, you would think after over 200 years of existence, after dealing with race in America, after the civil rights movement of 50 or 60 years ago, that we would still deal with the truth about race and how it affects not only black Americans, but white Americans too, and all those in between. I want to discuss this thing that a conversation that I think each of you must have with each other, your friends or your family, especially you that are non-melanated, in other words, white Americans, okay? First of all, you must understand where the term whiteness comes from. If you don't understand how things came into being, then you won't understand how to diagnose the problems today. But before I go on, let me introduce myself. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and welcome to the Umoja Circle. This discussion today is a tough one. It's going to be something, because we have to have these tough, we can't be beating around the bush about this thing that we talk about as white supremacy. I know that especially white America, and I'm talking to you right now, even though this is predominantly about black people, but you need to understand that we are here, no matter what people like Governor DeSantis is doing, or other white supremacists. That's what I use the term, and I'll explain why I frame that narrative that way, because this is what has been done to people of African descent for hundreds of years, who control the narrative. But I understand the difficulty for white America. You've been taught by your white parents as, the truth that America is the land of the free and the home of the brave. You've been shown that America is the land of the free and the home of the brave in movies, in textbooks, all these things that show the supremacy of America. But the images that always reflect is your image. Okay, that narrative, George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, but they're all white. Even the type of religion shows a white God. It's always been this white narrative that has been established. But there is a underlying narrative that has always been ignored, and how people of African descent, Native Americans, people who come from Mexico at the time, the brown aspect of our population, have been treated in America. And it does not reflect that narrative of liberty and justice for all. I'm gonna have a series of images to explain this discussion. It's gonna be difficult, but we must have this difficult discussion. This is the kind of dialogue that you need to have at the dinner table with your QAnon uncle or your so-called Trumpster in-laws, or whoever they may be, because unless you participate in the healing of this country, white America, we're going to have problems in the next decade or two, okay? Not to even add on, try to work together to deal with the global warming issue. But the race issue in America is a problem. First of all, there's only one race, and I had a couple of shows in the past where I showed that. I went back 300,000 years and tried to explain that there's only one race, and that's the human race. And that human being was established on the continent of Africa and looked like me. But again, that was another time, another story. But today I want to talk about white supremacy hidden in plain view. The first image I'm going to show is this image right here. It's a book by Ein Haney Lopez called Dog Whistle Politics. How coded racial appeals have reinvented racism and wrecked the middle class. In other words, we are so caught up, race has always been a part of American history. It infects our politics, it infects our economics, it infects all these things that would make us even a better country than it is. We are separated into different groups and interest groups. We have politicians in Washington in the Republican Party who, rather than vote for sensible things, that the infrastructure bills, they didn't do that, but they want to take credit for it based on certain ideologies that they pass on. They just want their rich allies, not the middle class and the poor. And especially, they don't want people to look like me to benefit in this country. Why is that? Why do they think that way? There is a history. The next slide I want to go to, but before I do that, I want you to, we saw about dog whistle politics. That's how you control the narrative. And that's what you find in Washington right now when you listen to Fox News. The dialogue that is said has nothing to do with the reality that we experience. They always use this technique. But the best person to explain this better is a gentleman who was one of the architects of this type of politics. His name was Lee Atwater. I just want you to listen to him. There's a little video that's going to come, and I'll talk to you on the other end of it.
Here's how I would approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all aren't quoting me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts you, it backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger, you know. So any way you look at it, race is coming on the back burner.
So what do you think? That was Lee Atwater. Now, who is Lee Atwater? Well, this is who Lee Atwater is. I want to show a close-up image of Mr. Atwater. Okay, he died in 1992, regretting everything he said or done. He was mentored by Strom Thurmond. Many of you might not know who Strom Thurmond is. Many of you might. He was one of what they would call the Dixiecrats. He was part of the Democratic Party in the 50s, and that was him on the left, Strom Thurmond. He was a senator, very powerful senator. He was very against the segregation. He was a segregationist. He said segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation all the time, forever. That was him, and he was Lee Atwater was influenced by him. But he also found his way in the halls of power. There you see him with Ronald Reagan. He advised Ronald Reagan. He told him how to do those dog whistle politics. There he goes again with Ronald Reagan in the Oval Office. The next one, you see him with George H.W. Bush. He advised him. Okay, next. Now, you might be familiar with those other two people in that picture with Lee Atwater. That's him on the right. Okay, Roger Stone there in the middle, and that's the advisor, the campaign chair of Donald Trump, who went to prison, who got convicted. That's him, and when he was young, I forgot his name, but you recognize the face. They all work together. Okay, Roger Stone still advises Trump in his criminal enterprise. So this is who Lee Atwater was. There he goes with Donald Trump. So he was very influential in the Republican Party. And he said things that you hear today, states' rights, and the Civil War was about this or that, other than it was about enslavement, and other than we don't care about black or brown people. But you don't say it outright. His mentor, Strom Thurmond, would use the N-word in his speech. He actually ran for president under the Dixiecrat party in 1949. Okay, thank goodness he lost. But this is who we're talking about. Okay, after Goldwater, again, let me reiterate. In 1964, when Goldwater was running for president, all the Dixiecrats, the Democrats, went over to the Republican Party. That's who exists in the Republican Party. The same Dixiecrats that once ran, who fought and established the Civil War and the Confederacy. So whenever you hear any of these pundits, again, using these dog whistles and these codes, you got to understand that that's a technique that's being used. I think I got a technique that I want to bring up, and this is the technique that I'm talking about. It's called semantic infiltration, and it's very simple. It is the art of forcing your opponent to use your language. The Republican Party, Lee Atwater, that's what he's talking about using words like state rights instead of talking about black people. But you are talking about black people, and how it affects your policies will affect the black population, and put the race issue out of the way. Don't focus on them. But you can't say it out loud. You use this technique. This technique was established. The word semantic infiltration came out in 1970. It was established by the State Department to negotiate with, opposition. And what you do, whatever the topic is that you're talking about, again, you can see Fox News is talking about. Let's say a critical race theory. Whatever the policies, you put in nonsensical stuff that has nothing to do with what you're debating. And I'm who understand critical race theory will stop the discussion to try to explain to you, well, it's not about that. This is what it's about. And what happens when that happens is that we stop talking about what the debate is about and start going down these rabbit holes. And the Republican Party is really good. And I use the Republican Party a lot because they're the ones who are using these techniques. They're the ones who are pushing out policies against women, especially black people. They're not, and the poor, who are using these techniques right in front of you to maintain white supremacy. Lee Atwater, okay, Donald Trump, those Trumpsters who follow him. They have this ideology, this belief that goes back to the Confederacy, okay? And I'll show you that this is part of the groundwork of the building of America. That's why they're pulling books out for shelves in Florida. That's why they're trying to reshape congressional districts. That's why they're concentrating, like in Alabama a couple of last year, tried to concentrate out of the 6 districts in Alabama, 5 or 6 districts, they try to make 1 district just for blacks only, which would give them no power in the electoral college votes to maintain white supremacy. And I know this, again, I said this is a difficult topic, but it is the truth. Let's go on. Another example, this comes from a book called 1984. Many of you might be familiar with. And what I just put this up there is that you see this, the wording, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. It seems nonsense, but that's an example of semantic infiltration. In other words, in that book, the organization is telling these people this nonsense. And they have to buy it because of the dystopian world in Oceania in the book 1984. And that's an example of what I'm talking about here. When you listen to Fox News, does it make sense what they're saying? No. They're telling you up is down, left is right. It doesn't matter. It just forces you to use those languages to either argue about it or complain about it, but it distracts you from the issue that you need to focus on. And a lot of their listeners are buying into that. That's why a lot of these folks are regretting it, because they're in jail now because they stormed the Capitol on January 6th, and now they're paying the price for listening to that nonsense because it was based on a lie pushed out by news media like Fox News, using semantic infiltration to lie to people, tell them up is down, left is right. That is, the Democratic Party is the one that's authoritarian, okay? Whereas the Republican Party is doing all the policies that produces an authoritarian system if we allow it. So you got to be careful. This is the world we're talking about. 1984 was published in 1949, okay? And they talked about future generations and whoever controlled the narratives. We're that future generation, and we're living it in plain view. White supremacy hidden in plain view. Let's go on. This is another quote, okay, from that book, 1984, which I just said, and I'll just reiterate it. Whoever controls the information and images of the present will determine how that present generation view their past. How many people understand that we are dealing with that now? If you control the narrative of how a people view their past, that sets the mark on how that people and society move into their future. If we listen to the narrative of the Republican Party, if we listen to the narrative of this conservative party, they've been at this for generations. This just didn't happen under Trump's domain. As I showed you with Lee Atwater and Ronald Reagan and H.W. Bush, this has been going on, and it goes back even farther during the Civil Rights Movement. You know, look at the thing about affirmative action. We got the Supreme Court judge now dealing with the Supreme Court now political, and basically following the tenets of the white supremacists who had infiltrated the government today on the Republican side. They put those judges in place so that affirmative action and that narrative about it only deals with black people and how we are benefited from affirmative action. No, we'll talk about who really benefited from affirmative action for 400 years. Let's go on. This is another thing that happened based on white supremacy and which Lee Atwater emphasized. It's called the Southern Strategy. This is a strategy that came out during the Nixon time. You see, this has been going on. They've been at this kind of political war for generations. Southern strategy and all those red states were once the Confederate states. They still have, again, the Confederacy lost the war, but they were winning for the last 100 or so more years. They've been winning the political war in America, and it culminated in what you see in the present moment. That's my point. White supremacy is the foundation of America, and this is the ideology that the South had. That's why they went to war, to maintain and put us in our place as black people. But as you can read, that is what the Southern strategy was all about. It was about ignoring the black vote. We don't give a dang about you N-words, okay? But we gonna only focus on the white supremacist views to the Southerners. They're the same. This was in 1970s, the same ideology made those people storm the Capitol building in the 21st century on January 6th. The same ideology, and they would pump this type of rhetoric, code words, like, and all the things and the narrative that fit that ideology of white supremacy. Let's go on. And I'll go on into the next show with this topic, so just bear with me. Now, I have a picture, a statue here. This statue, this got taken down a couple of months ago, but it was in the state capital of Tennessee, in Nashville. This is Nathan Bedford Forrest. Anybody who's history buff, he was a general in the Confederacy. Now, he was honored by a statue, and all these statues that have been all over the country for the last 100 years. Some of them are being taken down. And you want to know why people have to, like me, were upset seeing that every day? This is in the capital, state capital of Tennessee. Okay, this was not, he was not honored in, now the thing about Nathan Bedford Forrest is that he fought for the Confederacy. Okay, but the narrative is that he's some great hero. Hero to who? He fought against the United States of America. He was a traitor. All the Confederates were traitors. That's the semantic infiltration, the switching of the language. This statue was dedicated in 1970. It wasn't dedicated in 1865. So any black person who had to go to that state capitol, this man sold slaves. He made his money selling people that looked like me. As a lieutenant general, he was in command of Confederate troops that stormed a fort in a battle called the Battle of Fort Pillow. Look it up. Everything I say, you don't have to believe me. And they slaughtered, massacred black troops and the white troops that were with them. They did not take them prisoners. This is the man who led that Confederate cavalry unit. He was a cavalry officer at Fort Pillow. Yet he's in there, and he's from Tennessee. Only thing he did of note was kill U.S. soldiers and sell slaves. But yet he is honored to have a place in the Tennessee state capitol, an alcove, and honored as a hero. That's white supremacy. This is another image that I want you to see. This is a yearbook in Jacksonville, from high school in Jacksonville, Florida, okay? They lost the war, but won the political war, and still winning the political war. The war is perpetual. That's how the American system works. And if your interest is not being, if you're not participating in the war, at least with your weapon of choice, voting, then you are allowing these people to continue to put their interests before you as an American citizen if you're black in America. How you think in Jackson, Florida has a large black population, and every day black children have to go to a school named after a Confederate who would enslave them in a minute. Yet we honor this person, and we have bases, American bases, that we had these Confederate soldiers. They dishonored, they betrayed their oath of office. They were congressmen, they were senators, they were military members, and from West Point. They were lawyers and doctors, and that ideology of white supremacy was the foundation of the Confederacy. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, many of you are familiar with this image of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. You know, we talk about it, we celebrate it every year. Of our ancestors 60 years ago, 50 or 60 years ago, and the march of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and you got these white police officers beating up on all those brothers and sisters who were marching peacefully. This is America, okay, in 1960s. Okay, you know who Edmund Pettus was? Well, let's go on to the next one. This is Edmund Pettus. was the head of the most notorious white terrorist group in Alabama. He was the grand dragon of the Alabama KKK, probably up until the civil rights movement. He was in charge of the KKK, and he has a bridge. And the black people who were doing their civil rights based on, because we were pretty much told we were free and that we were citizens by the 14th Amendment and that we could vote. 100 years later, we still trying to vote, and we trying to cross a bridge, and the white supremacists that permeated all throughout Alabama in the 1960s said that we could not, and pretty much beat everybody that was there over the head. In fact, they actually deputized white thugs between the age of 18 and 40 to be able to control those blacks again. America, I hate to say it, that even though you were taught about this land of the free and the home of the brave, underneath that is white supremacy that propped up this country. That's the truth. That's why they're pulling books again from shelves in Florida. That's why they constantly talking about, we can't talk about, black history, because black history is American history, and American history has always been, the foundation of American history has always been about race. When you have your economic system was built on race, and your ideology is based on race. America has always been that way. And until we address that tough subject, we're going to have the problems we have today. Let's go on. We got a few minutes to go. There's another image you might be familiar with. This is the Confederate monument, or what they consider the Confederate Mount Rushmore in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Anybody from the Atlanta area know what Stone Mountain is. I used to live there for about a year, not far in Stone Mountain. But I never went to that monument. I refused because I knew the history. Okay, this was started by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. So even white women, who benefited from the civil rights movement, and that's another story. But the United Daughters of the Confederacy put the money up to build that. Let's go on to the next one. What was so important about this? Well, in 1915, a man named William Joseph Simmons on Georgia's Stone Mountain had these items with him. He built an altar with his bricks. He had that Bible. He had a cross that lit that night. Him and a large contingency of United States Americans, white supremacists, and a sword and an American flag, which is an oxymoron in a sense, because they did. But again, they put the American flag, but they really believed in Confederate ideology. And he then became the reinvented Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. And I'm gonna leave it right here because I only got a few more minutes on this segment, but I'll start off in the next segment to continue. That America is built on white supremacy. And we have to deal with that. We got to have a truth and reconciliation type of discussion, an honest discussion. We got to understand that we are going to have problems if we don't deal with the truth of who we are, how this country stays. We can't live on a lie. That the underlying truth is difficult. The underlying truth is hard. But it's a truth that we must deal with. So until next time, I'm stopping here. Peace. Hotep. Bye-bye.